Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and thank you so much for tuning in to watch another one of our conversations at home right now. I want to remind everyone watching this video that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization which is continuing to raise money for a COVID-19 Emergency Assistance Fund. This fund is working to help actors who are currently out of work due to all of the closed film and television productions at the moment in terms of basic expenses, paying rent, paying utility bills, and just buying groceries. So please check out the link below this video and consider supporting if you're able to in any way. Today we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by the wonderful Kathryn Hahn, who I feel like has a myriad of projects in the air right now. And you were just saying that you're in the midst of homeschooling everyone. So how is the day to day? Is it started to feel like a new normal to you at this point?
Yes, and it's amazing how fast that happened. That all of a sudden it's the new normal, but for sure. And I just want to also just take a second to thank the SAG-AFTRA Foundation for all the work that you're doing. I know it's such a bananas time for performers, so I just want to send all of my love and good energy to my fellow actors out there. But yeah, it is really weird how we just kind of transitioned into this new normal for sure. My kids are 10 and 13, so they're a little more self-reliant. I can't imagine being with a toddler right now, but there are definitely like the homeschool and code reds every day that we have to try to put out. And I'm no help because I have, like we were talking before, I'm very technologically unsavvy. So this is a very interesting time for me.
I feel like it would be remiss not to ask you about the Geffen Playhouse video that you put together along with your family, where you did a reenactment of Glenn Ross with American Girl dolls.
Yes.
I'm just curious about the genesis of it and how you came up with that concept with your kids' toys.
Yes. My friend Matt Shackman, who runs the Geffen, was looking for original content to keep the theaters in people's minds and keep that theater in particular, which is an amazing local theater. And we, I was thinking of something a little more interesting than just doing a monologue maybe, and we wanted to enlist our family but not show their faces. And we'd been thinking of sock puppets, and I don't know, Glenn Ross just made me laugh. And my daughter was, of course, thrilled to swear. Real thrilled, turns out. That was like a real selling point for her. And came out real fast and she was very excited about it. We were quite kind of taken aback by her performance. She was very excited. And my son was the very reluctant and DP. And we had a hard out. It was a tense shoot. But it was really fun to do it. I mean, we were just, the whole thing made us laugh. My daughter was also the costume designer, sets, props. She had a whole vision for it that we had nothing to do with. So we kind of let them just run the show, but the whole thing kind of made us giggle. And we made sure to use the script. We made sure from the play, the play script, and not the movie script. But yeah, it just made us giggle. Anything to keep the theater in people's minds during this time, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about your work on I Know This Much Is True, which just premiered a couple weeks ago on HBO. And I love the way that you were saying that this character felt very different to other characters that you'd had the opportunity to play before, and it gave you the opportunity to do a lot of unique things as an actor. So I was curious about kind of what those things were that you felt like you got to dive into performance and craft-wise that you maybe hadn't had fulfilled in other roles, and how it really allowed you to evolve your craft.
Dessa Constantine, who I played in this, was she felt, especially maybe in the work that I had done just recently, I had just come off of Mrs. Fletcher. Which was just about a month before I started this. Before I started I Know This Much Is True, and of course I had ideally been looking for kind of a lighter swing, and it's pretty heavy material. So I thought, but I mean, there was no way I couldn't do it. I was so excited to work with both Derek Cianfrance, the director, and Mark. And there was something about Dessa that just struck me as so, I'd just been playing, I think, parts that had been a little like as kind of, it's very intelligent and unapologetic as they are. There is something kind of like searching in all of them, or hungry in all of them, and wanting in all of them. And there was something about Dessa that had just felt so satisfied or okay. Like there was something about her that was just very optimistic and very like she had a well of forgiveness and satisfaction, I guess, in her that I just hadn't really felt in a lot of the parts that I had been playing. And I think it came from just a sense of knowing herself in a way that a lot of the other parts that I had been playing had not felt. And so it was just like a different engine, I guess, than some of the parts that I had been asked to play previously. And so I was excited to explore that engine. And also just the idea of playing with Mark and Derek. I had been in the playground with a lot of women directors recently, and so I was very excited to dive into something with the two of them, and they were so incredible, both of them. I mean, Derek as a director is what you want as a director. You just felt such freedom and autonomy, and there was no accidents. Like, you walked on the set and it was like yours. It was performance over, it was just a performance prioritized over everything. So when the set was yours as an actor, you could do no wrong as long as you were grounded in the given circumstances and what you were doing. And, we had done all of the homework and we'd done all the work, and you showed up and it was like, you just felt such freedom. It just was like the most fearless, safe to take risks, safe to fail, safe to fling yourself into the abyss emotionally space. And it was like, I just learned so much. It's kind of like now, unfortunately, the bar is like raised because it just felt like that kind of why I kind of wanted to do it in the first place. Like that kind of feeling of like looking into your acting partner's eyeballs, learning who you are through that person as a character, which is how I kind of work anyway. I feel like so much of how I find myself as who I'm playing is through my scene partner. So much of it is, of course, just listening. And they're both such incredible listeners. It was just like it was a real privilege to be able to watch the two of them work.
Yeah, I imagine especially so with Derek directing all of the episodes. And I love how much autonomy he gives all of his actors in terms of forming their character. And I heard you talking a little bit about how a big part of that process was him asking you a lot of questions to kind of lead you down the path of figuring these details out for yourself. And I was curious how that was a really useful tool in terms of discovery with your character, but also if you remember any of the specific questions that he would ask that were really useful to you.
Yeah, I mean, we would sit down in a scene. I mean, there's so many before we shot and then during, but there was like, he would be a lot of like calling, pardon my French, but like a lot of like calling out bullshit. So there would just be a lot, which you just aren't asked those questions of very often. So there'd be a lot of like sitting down in a scene and he would be like, is this like, are you, like, would you, like, is this feel like, would you do this? Like little specifics of just, and you were able to have I felt so okay with being like, no. In other environments, when the scene is already set, the lights are already there, you feel kind of like, it's already like in place. You're a piece of a huge machine. You kind of like make it work because you don't want to rock the production bubble. So you kind of like navigate emotionally through stuff that's already in place. And in this case, he was like, it's performance first. So if it doesn't feel right, we'll make it work for you. So like that, it was just that kind of, it was like that kind of like, just emotional, and just like action driven sensitivity that you just don't find. I mean, we shot a scene for the funeral. There's like a funeral in it. Dominic and I lose a baby, and it's like when you see it, it's like this little snippet. And usually in a show, you would, you see it in the script. It's like the funeral. They go to the funeral. It's just like this no dialogue. It's just this little teeny thing. And usually, you would show up, there'd be like maybe a camera or two. It would take like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours just to get like some reactions. They would put the camera here, And in this, it took the same amount of time. It was like an hour. But what he did was he had like 3 cameras. He set up a church, an entire service, and we had no idea what we were going to walk into, but he had us all like listen to a service. So we all just like sat there and listened to a real Greek Orthodox funeral mass. And the cameras just grabbed reactions. And it was the same, it was not like there was any wasted time. It's not like it was indulgent or it took longer than a normal shoot, but it was just, he was able to be surprised by our reactions. We were able to be surprised. And it felt somehow like holier because it was just true. It was just truer. So, I mean, that kind of stuff is like real, it's incredibly, incredibly rare. And it just, but it just adds texture. And then Mark was able to carry that real experience into the rest of his journey as Dominic. So he had that actual experience to hold rather than just like little Band-Aidy reaction shots or just his, you know, something that he kind of built in his mind. I don't know. It's a way of working, but it's like a really blessed way of working.
Yeah. Was Derek shooting with multiple cameras at other points, or was it just the specificity of that scene because you had such a limited amount of time?
We were actually shooting on real film too, which is also incredibly rare. And so there is something about hearing the preciousness that you'd have this certain amount of time, that it's not just like forever and always digitally, like you have all the time in the world. So like they put the cans of film on and you know you just have this certain amount of time and you can kind of hear it. Because I don't work on real film that often, like, so this was kind of new to me. So they changed you could kind of hear, there was some takes where they would have to you would hear it kind of them changing over the film, and that was always like heightened, but there's like a holiness too of that process. So you know that when it's rolling, it adds something, like it adds stakes. So everyone just has to be like extra kind of focused because it's less, let's just try it. Do you know what I mean? It's added. It adds like a little bit of like, I guess I just keep wanting to say like a little bit of like added sacredness to it. I forgot what your question was though.
Oh, I was just really curious about, the filming and whether.
Oh yeah. So he did do more than one camera. Yeah. Most of the time, unless there was just not enough room in the room. Cause he also did, real, locations for everything. So, if they just physically couldn't get more than one camera in it, you just didn't.
And how did that shift things for you in terms of the way that you think about your performance? Because obviously sometimes there's slightly nuanced details that you pull out differently depending on the coverage and the camera placement. But if there's two, did it just kind of cause you to think about it less in a different way?
I usually, and this is something that has only become a part of my like working vocabulary since, I really do think, since working on a movie called Afternoon Delight, which was back, my dates are out of my mind now. Like, I don't know what time is anymore. Like everything's like, but like, it was back when
2009, 2010-ish, maybe not that specific year, but
but that was like, that kind of shifted that for me, where I really lost, I trust, like when you have a trust with your camera operator where you can feel that it's happening, but you don't have to like really rely on it. It's like, just becomes like where you don't have to feel like, where energetically, that they've got you, but you don't have to like, it's most important, the connection with your partner. So, and that becomes like a third kind of like party, or a fourth. But like in this case, like there were parts, I mean, Mark is incredible. Like he always like can kind of spidey sense where it is. But like there were scenes in this, like for example, in the first one where I was so like, charged and nervous, and it was like, Mark, it was our first scene, and there's so much history in there, and I was like just holding on to so much, and I was like, when I came up for air at the end of it, I was like, I didn't even know where the freaking cameras were. Like, I didn't even know where they were. So like, and that's always the most fun for me is because I know that there's this like quiet third unspoken dance happening where the camera operator and the DP, like no one's worried about catching something, like, or having it be perfect or having it be like framed up. Like, we just are letting it flow. And if they need it, then the next take, they'll be like, can you be here? Can you be here? And I'll, of course, like whatever they need. But when it's that like quiet dance of like, we'll get it, and everybody just like trusts because like something else is happening that's like unspoken and in the moment, like that's the most fun. I love that feeling.
Yeah. I was also curious about the unique aspect, and you kind of mentioned this in terms of Mark having that funeral scene to really carry forward in his performance, but I also imagine for you as well, because the show jumps around in terms of time so much, and we see your character in that moment. We have to see her in kind of the present day as well. And what's the unique aspect of crafting a character in that way, where there's massive chunks of time in which there aren't any details in the script, but they've gone through so much of an emotional journey, and how do you think about that differently as opposed to when you're doing something more linear?
Yeah, this is my, I know this much is true water bottle. I just realized too, this is my set one. I've been using it. Yeah, that was interesting for me, especially because I just come off of Mrs. Fletcher, which was like, you know, every scene, every day basically. And it is definitely like easier when you have like, because performance becomes a cumulative, you know, like it just does, like you don't have to think about it as much or overthink it, because you just kind of like, it's behind you, you know, it just becomes like you just kind of show up and it's there behind you to kind of carry you into the next day. And, you know, I know as an actor, that feeling of like when you have your one scene in a gig on like one day in the middle of something, and you're like up the whole night before, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, and you know that you're showing up to a set with actors that have been like doing it the whole time, and they're like so much more chill. And you're like, oh my God, how am I gonna, like, I gotta focus, like, and there's like, you have like a tension, and that's like a really hard, that's like such an intense feeling. And especially in this, because there's like so much history in that. We shot that first scene in my first scene in the series. We shot that first, which happens to be like a later one. So we had like a lot of history that we were bringing to it, and I actually found that helpful because there was something like work backwards towards. But yeah, we had to bring a ton of shit to this first scene. And so we didn't have a ton of time. I'd never worked with him before. We didn't have a ton of time together. So we tried to do stuff together that was like more unspoken before it. Like we did, like just hanging out and having dinner was like not going to be like as helpful to me. It's just like, you know, tending music, just like doing, just like walking, just like, you know, just trying to find like an unspoken history that could like lodge us out of our heads, and just like, you know, just, you know, so we could just like meet each other like at a different level. And that seemed to work. And he's also just like so incredible that we just were able to like meet, you know, he's just so incredible that you just like meet in his eyeballs, and you're like, okay, you just like, the history was just there. And he's just like an incredible, again, just an incredible listener. So if you're just like open to it, then it was there.
I feel like that's the dream scenario for any actor to have walking onto a set.
Yeah, but it was hard, like I think for a lot of us, because, but it's credit to Derek I just credit Derek and Mark, because a lot of it's like Mark's story, and he's like, unbelievable. But a lot of us actors in this, like, Rosie, Archie, Juliet, Imogen, Rob, like there's John Procaccino, like there's all these incredible actors that have to like bop in and out of this story, and it's a very intense, and we have to like weave out and then like kind of arrive and bring all of this to it. And I think it's just a credit to Derek and Mark for just like encouraging collaboration and just having such welcoming energy for whenever we would arrive. But I mean, I'm telling you, like, it was bananas. Like I would come in, do a scene, look at the call sheet for the rest of the day, and look at the call sheet for the rest of the week and be like, oh my God, I cannot believe what he has to do for the rest of this week. It was like, he's a miracle.
He is. And I wanted to ask you about Mrs. Fletcher, since you're mentioning filming that just before. I know this much is true before. And I was really interested to see that was your first time that you were taking on a producer role in addition to performing in something. And I was interested in the reason why you really wanted to make that leap and take on that role, particularly with this show, and how that also potentially allowed you to have more of a voice in the development of this character as well.
I did that also in I Love Dick.
Mm-hmm.
I was also a producer of I Love Dick, but I did both of those shows. I took on the role of producer kind of like post production. And I think it was like mostly because on both gigs, it was like when I would look back kind of like on what I had contributed to the shows, it just became very clear, to the credit of everybody, to the producers and the creators of both of those shows. It was pretty clear that I had done more than, I deserved to have producer credit on like what I had contributed to those shows. Because I really wanted my fingers in a lot of the pots of the making of both of those. Because both of those meant a ton to me, both of those projects. And, it was just like I think because I just wanted to be involved in a lot. I just didn't want to just, I think because I was kind of leading the both of, for lack of a better word, because I was like, kind of like, they were sensitive subjects to me. I was exploring something like unapologetically vulnerable, and like I was so excited to like dive into that, but I really wanted to be a part of her journey. So I was excited about, being able to be involved in both of those projects in those ways.
Yeah, I also love the decision that Tom Perrotta made to hire all-female directors, and I was curious about how the myriad of having all-female directors, and then also this being the first project where you had the opportunity to work with an intimacy coordinator, really created a different type of environment and tone on set when you were filming a lot of the more intimate scenes with the show.
Yeah, having all women directors was really imperative to all of us. Yeah, it was really important to me as well, just because it was Tom. Yeah, and he, to his credit, saw it really clearly, especially because he had written it. It was like very important that, and because of the subject matter, that it be women there. Just because it was like important that lens be told through a woman. That we were seeing a woman exploring her sexuality and exploring her sexuality at that time in her life, and just like exploding into this new chapter. That she didn't think that she could. And an intimacy coordinator was someone that I had never worked with before. That was a role that I didn't know existed. And Claire Warden is her name. And she became an invaluable part of the process. And loved her so much. And she was like, she became somebody that it was a role that I thought was, for a second, I was like worried that it was going to be someone kind of maybe that would be between me and the director. You know what I mean? That was always a relationship that I thought was the relationship between myself and the director. But she became such an anchor and not even just a bridge, but just somebody that could just make sure that we all of us were exactly on the same page before we would jump into any of those scenes. And Yeah, I can't imagine a set without an intimacy coordinator now.
Yeah, and on a different tangent, I wanted to jump in by asking you a couple questions about Central Park, the new animated series that you have coming out on Apple TV, which I loved, because I think there's such a unique challenge to voice acting that, you know, people don't think about how challenging it is, and you were recording a lot of this without even having the animation drawn for scenes, and
Yeah.
And so I was curious about kind of just how you set about navigating that when you really only have a few of the details, and you're also trying to craft this on-screen relationship with your family, played by Leslie Odom Jr., Titus Burgess, and Kristen Bell, but without ever meeting them and without having them in the room to bounce off of. So how do you kind of navigate and fill in all those massive empty spaces in between to bring the performance that you do?
Yeah, Mara, it was nuts. I mean, I had done, it was co-created by Lauren Bouchard and Josh Gad, and they are awesome. And I'd worked with Lauren before a little bit on Bob's Burgers, and I'd done some animation before, and it is always the same thing, like where you're like, really takes all of your imagination because you're completely building it in your mind. And it is very bananas, and I always have such respect for people that are like, so can do it. Like but I love it. It's such a different challenge. It works such a different like muscle, and it's so good for your imagination. And this was, when it was pitched to me, it was going to be pitched as a musical, which I was like, what? And I didn't hear the music though. I had not seen really a sketch. I knew it was about a family, and then I'd heard the cast, and it was like all those things were like, I mean, this is a challenge. I'd never done anything like this before. Those group of voices are extraordinary. I would never consider myself, I mean, I'm not like a professional singer. I love karaoke. I have dabbled in the singing arts, but I was like, I just wanted it to be, I thought, what an amazing challenge, and it would be so fun. And it turns out it is a total blast. I mean, I love it so. And they, but to get the chemistry, like, Lauren Bouchard, it turns out, is an amazing acting partner because I do most of the scenes with him, and he's kind of a shapeshifter, and he really is an incredible acting partner. And so he's always there to read off camera for the most part, or Josh sometimes. And I think it's because of their casting prowess, like that when I saw the show, I really was surprised and kind of moved by the chemistry. Like, it's really weird. Everybody's voices really do kind of blend, and you feel chemistry, which is so weird to me. But I think it really is because of their casting prowess. Like, I think they know how to put people together, which is kind of, I just feel like magic.
Yeah,
it's true. And even vocally, like how do you put people's singing voices together and have it sound so good? I mean, that's just like me having no idea how it works, but it really does.
Did you know kind of specifically that you were going to be playing the mother of this family? Or
yes, and I knew that Leslie was going to be playing my husband, and so my daughter, of course, would never have let me say no.
I know that, David was saying that he didn't know he was going to be playing an older woman because Lauren likes to cast before he actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I was curious.
I knew Kristen was going to play my daughter, which of course made me laugh because I was like, oh, really? We had played, of course, Friends and Bad Moms, and now she's playing my daughter. She's not great for my ego, but it's fine.
It's animated. Anything goes.
Exactly.
But in terms of that, with the music side of things, how did you kind of navigate preparing to go in and do this? Because especially even within that, there's so many different styles of music that they pull into the show as well. I mean, I think there's something like 4 songs in every single episode. It's amazing.
I mean, I'm really cocky with karaoke, like incredibly cocky. And I can kind of go all over the place genre-wise. So I'm like, throw whichever genre at me and I'm going to fake it till I make it. And they're so good in there, and they take such good care. And I mean, I had the best time I was like, I can't believe I'm getting like a music lesson from Josh Gad. Like they're so incredibly, they make you feel like $1 million. And yeah, so it's so something I never thought I would do. And it's just, I don't like to, I mean, I'm not one to shy away from any kind of newness. So it's so fun to say that this is happening. It's just so crazy. And I'm so excited to watch it with my kids. We've seen a couple episodes together, and it's so sweet. So I'm like, it's just really some of those songs I can't get out of my head. So I'm really, really excited about it.
I think it's also the perfect show for people to have right now as an escape.
I totally agree.
Also, on a different tangent, you touched upon this a little bit earlier in terms of talking about the way with Mark, you really kind of like to feed off of your scene partner in terms of discovery of your character. But you've talked a little bit in the past about how your process was different, and you used to really do most of that prep and really kind of show up with like a little bit more of like a rigid formed idea of who characters were. So I was curious about the point at which that started to shift for you, and how your preparation process looks now before you walk onto set versus what it used to be at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with also just kind of maybe it's getting older too, but I used to definitely do a lot of, you know, the journaling and the writing and the thinking and the research. And sometimes for me, I felt that a lot of that would kind of get in my way of being present, or sometimes it made me stop really being able to listen, because I felt like I had to be doing what I had worked on rather than be available to what was happening in the moment. And it was like, again, I think had to do with something like me trying to be a good student, because I had gone, you know, to a lot of schooling, and I was like, and sometimes like that, it took a second for me to really like let what I had learned settle into what I needed for myself, rather than like slap it on the surface, if that makes sense. So, so it just like took a second for me. Like I would pride myself on doing all sorts of homework, but really a lot of it was not useful. And I think a lot of it happened for me when I just didn't have the time to do it, which was after having children. And so it was like, I would like rack myself with guilt of not like preparing. But then like something kind of like gave way. And I was like, oh, I don't need all of it. Like there's certain things like that are essential that I'll know for myself. And some of it actually happens weirdly when you're doing it. Like some of the, like you kind of will start to find, like, I always read it once and then I read it again through the first person. Like I always read it again through, like, no matter how big the part is, like I always try to read it like through the lens of who I'm playing. So like, you know, you just try to see it through that lens, like see everything through who I'm playing. And so that kind of like helps. And then I write down what everybody says about me in it. Like, so just like your own perceptions and what other people's perceptions are of you. And you know, any other research you need, but it's just like whatever works for you to help it like lock on the inside rather than slapping it on the outside, I think.
Yeah.
And it's different for everybody, but I think that that's what it was. That's what it was for me.
Yeah. And you've also talked a little bit about how much earlier in your career, when you were playing more supporting roles before you were stepping into, you know, such a myriad of leads, that you kind of didn't necessarily always feel that you were going to get that opportunity. And I was curious about what the shifts are that kind of happen, especially bearing in mind that it has a different weight and responsibility when you're walking onto set as the number one versus when you're coming in for a guest spot, or you're just coming in to shoot a couple of scenes throughout a week. And how did that really kind of shift and change the way that you were thinking about projects and having to approach things, if at all?
I mean, I still think of myself like as just an actor that never knows if the next job's going to happen around the corner. We all do. But I'm like, I think, you know, I still do think kindness is, and decency goes a long way, just being a good person. I mean, I always think that way. I always think like, I still always think, and it's so weird to be thinking about this now because I've been thinking about it a lot, but I'm like, you know, it's a circus. Like the whole thing is a circus, and like that you know, and I always think like that, you know, an actor wouldn't be there. It's like without the people that, you know, like just like in a circus, like the, you know, the performers, no one could do it without everybody being able to put up the tent and like doing the thing. Like nothing could exist without everybody. So like we're all in it together, and that's like my favorite thing about like shooting is like that feeling of like when everybody. This is gonna like almost make me cry right now thinking about it, but like I have such memories of like meeting at the hotel bar with like all the crew, you know, after like, you know, whatever, week 4, everybody buying each other like a beer because like, but it's because I love that feeling of like everybody doing like that, not just like ensemble of actors, but the ensemble of like everybody. And so I don't know if this is answering your question or not, but so I don't feel any kind of I don't feel like a certain difference, only that I feel like, I guess just the older I get, the more I just want to just, the more I see, the more it means something, the more I can like see, I guess, younger, I guess I just want people to like just treat people with respect. Like I just can see like, that people can walk around like this a little bit of their experience, and that it's just, the actor's not the only person in the world that's making a movie. So I just sometimes want to be like, like, none of this would be happening without all these other people, and the actor's not the most important thing. And, you know, sometimes that kind of can drive me crazy. I know I'm not really answering your question, but in terms of like looking for jobs, like I guess being being a lead is not like is not like as important to me. I certainly have loved those rides and love those rides, and I really love the stories that I've been asked to do through those lead roles. I love telling stories of women that are my age, and I love the stories that I've been able to tell about women in my age, because I think that there are still so many stories to be told, and I hope I can still be asked to tell them, because I think they're like so many dangerous and hilarious and scary and mysterious and complicated and incredible stories left to be told. So I really hope that I'm asked to do them and that I can make them. But yeah, I mean, I just love being an actor. I can't believe I get to do it. It's really weird for all of us to just sit on our thumbs. We just have to, you know, make other kind of Zoom box art right now. It's a really weird time.
Well, I hope that you're able to be telling some of those stories again soon and be sitting in a bar on week 4 with the whole crew again. And thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
Laura, this was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.